Well, hello, Providence Financial friends and family. Anthony Sicaro here. I'm founder and president of Providence Financial and Insurance Services located in Woodland Hills, California. I'm also an attorney at law practicing estate planning in California. And I'm host of the Providence Financial Retirement Show, which airs every Saturday on AM 870. KRL Lays the Answer, and that's at 9:30 a.m. And if you missed those shows, you can listen to them on our podcast, which our Saturday show airs the following Monday at 6 o'clock a.m. You can search for the Providence Financial Retirement Podcast on your favorite podcast player, or just go to providencefinancialpodcast.com and you can listen to any of our past 100 or more shows that are there. Well, periodically, I like to put out videos for our friends and family, and there's two purposes for this video. The first purpose is I want to just take a couple of minutes and talk about an AssetBook link that all of you received if you have TD Ameritrade accounts with us that are under our management. And then, and more importantly, the bulk of this video is going to be giving you a fourth quarter market update, what we can expect in the fourth quarter. So first, let's talk about AssetBook. I had sent out a video maybe 10 days ago or so letting you know that last week sometime you would all be getting an email with your AssetBook login. And so we have sent that email to all of you. And yet, as much as I would have liked that email to come from some kind of place called AssetBook or in the domain name using assetbook.com or something like that, it doesn't have that there. They're a smaller company. We kind of have to play by their rules. And so the email you got, although very legitimate, didn't have any name you would recognize at all. And although I had kind of given you that email address before so you could be on the lookout for it, I want to give it to you again, because if you're listening to me thinking I didn't get an email, well, you probably got it, but you didn't recognize it, so you might have deleted it, or it might have gone to junk. So let me give you the email that it would have come from so you can go find it. And then once you find it, I'm going to tell you what you can use it for again. So the email that it's going to come from is FinApp@modestpark.com. Let me spell it for you. FinApp is F as in Frank, A as in Adam, N as in Nancy, A as in, you know what? I'm sorry, I messed up. I is not A as in Adam. Start over, scratch that, do it again. Let me give it to you again. F as in Frank, I as in India, N as in Nancy, A as in Adam, P as in Paul, P as in Paul. So it's FinApp, and then it's the @ sign, which is shift 2 for those of you computer illiterates out there. Shift 2, the @ sign. So FinApp at modestpark.com. Modest, MODEST, Park, PARK.com. So it's FinApp at modestpark.com. It's all run together. There's no spaces between anything. FinApp at modestpark.com. Search that, find it. You're going to have a temporary password there. Go in, create yourself change your password to a new password. And once you change that password there, you will then have access to your account. And there's really two significant benefits for using AssetBook, which is absolutely free to you. The first benefit is that it does more than what TD Ameritrade will allow you to do. If you have a TD Ameritrade account with us that we're managing, then you got this email and you have access to AssetBook for free. When you look at your TD Ameritrade accounts through the TD Ameritrade online, you can see your accounts real time, and that's about it. You can see your investments, but that's about it. You can't really do any analysis. You can't ask yourself or do any reports about, how did your investments do the first half of the year, the second half of the year, the last week, the last month, the last year. You can't really do any of that stuff. And you have to look at every account on an account-by-account basis. You can't put them together in one household. Well, AssetBook allows you to do all of that. AssetBook allows you to look at everything from a household standpoint, because that's what we do. We don't look at every individual account. We look at everything from a household standpoint. And then it allows you to run some numbers. It allows you to break it down by period to see how your accounts have done over a certain period of time. It allows you to break down your accounts by assets. So you can take a look at preferred stocks versus BDCs versus REITs versus other things. And it allows you to just do an analysis for those of you that want to do that. And we've found that a lot of people have used it, love it, very intuitive, very easy to use. So a lot of people, we've got a lot of compliments on it, and it's something that we've only been using for now probably a couple of months. So one is it allows you to do some analysis that you can't do on TD Ameritrade. The second thing that it allows you to do is this is how we're going to send you your invoices. Prior to AssetBook, we had another firm that we were using called Orion. Prior to Orion, we were using Black Diamond. And these are companies that for reasons have just changed. And this is how we have always gotten you your invoices, is through some kind of document vault or document center where we will put them there. And then with your username and password, as long as you go in and you set it up and you put an email address there, then what will happen is AssetBook will send you an email every time we upload some kind of document. So when we put your invoice in the document center, you'll get an email from AssetBook that says, hey, you have a new document to look at. And then what you can do is go look on the invoice. Now, as always, you don't have to pay the invoice. We just deduct it from your accounts, but we want you to know what you're paying. So that's the reason you have access to it. So go find that website, FinApp at modestpark.com. I spelled it out earlier. Find it in your junk folder. If you deleted it accidentally, find it there. Or if it's still sitting in your inbox, find it there so you can create your username and password. It will only take you a few minutes. You'll be glad you did. So that's part one of this video, is talking about AssetBook. Part two, and what I want to spend the rest of this time talking about, is I want to give you a fourth quarter update. I think it was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago when I had put out a video, if I remember correctly, talking about the fact that really the summer should be pretty mellow. There wasn't really anything that looked like it was going to spook the summer, and that's kind of what happened. Matter of fact, everything was pretty mellow in general. And the market has had now 7 months up. September was a volatile month. It started getting volatile in the last week or two of September. And the month wound up being down about 3 to 5%, kind of on the equity side. Plus, the 10-year Treasury has jumped. And so all of this really has an impact on your portfolio. And September 30th was the ending date of the quarter, so you're going to be getting your statements here soon. And I want to just talk about what you're likely to see, and then also what could be happening for the fourth quarter as well, too. So the fourth quarter is looking to be a little more volatile, and most economists and analysts that I've been reading and following along with my own thoughts is that the fourth quarter is probably going to be, continue the volatility that we saw in the last couple of weeks of September, and likely to be a pullback of some sort. Of course, we don't know how much. Market is pulled back 3 to 5% at this point, just depending on what index you're looking at. And I think 10 or 15% is very common consensus across the board that very well could be. There are some people talking about 20%, and some people even talking about maybe 30%. I don't think 30% is going to happen. We don't know. October has always been a very volatile month, and if there's any black swan events out there that could cause the market to go down, well, they call it black swan event because we don't know what it is. So right now we're not necessarily thinking that, but I think most economists and analysts are thinking that we're probably looking for a 10 to 20% pullback in the fourth quarter. And I want to talk about some of the reasons why that is. Now, by the way, I did a podcast, I think 2 or 3 or 4 podcasts ago, that was called, Is a 30% Correction Bad? And that's what I talked about. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that now, but if you want to know the answer to that question, is a 30% correction bad? Go listen to that podcast. Now, some of you might be thinking, of course it's bad. Not so fast. Go listen to the podcast. You'll find out. Again, you can do that by going to providencefinancialpodcast.com. Is a 30% market correction bad? It was named something like that. Bottom line, though, is let's talk about some of these things that could be causing the market to have some volatility in the fourth quarter. One is that the market has just had a phenomenal run up. 7 months, the market kept going straight up. September was the first month that it went down in the last 7 months. But even since the market hit the bottom of COVID, which was a year ago, March of 2020, the market's just been on fire. And it's very normal for the market to want to take a breather, very normal for corrections to happen as a result of that. So really, that's just one thing that could be. It's just going to be a normal part of our normal cycle. Something else that could cause the market to have weakness, I'm going to be looking at my notes here as well too, is some of the new COVID variants that are out there. Delta is the most common variant, but there's another one out there that is starting to gain some ground, and it's looking like it's breaking through some of the vaccines. And the government is not anxious to go shut down everything again, but who knows? Is there going to be a de facto shutdown where people start getting it and shut themselves down? A lot of people, seniors create a huge portion of our population, and people that are in that senior category are worried. So if a mutant virus starts to gain ground again, then it might not be that the government shuts it down, but people just decide to stay home. And of course, that slows economic activity, which then is not good for the market and could create some volatility in the fourth quarter. So we got to pay attention to those mutant variants. Another thing that could be problematic is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has indicated that they're going to raise rates maybe a little faster than they were thinking before. We were thinking of 2023. They kind of indicated maybe 2022. And I don't envy them. They're in a very precarious position because they have to balance what they're trying to do versus offsetting the market. Raising interest rates is not good for the stock market, but it's a balancing act. And it seems like the Federal Reserve can more easily spook the market than they can calm the market down. And that's the thing. If they raise rates too fast, then they could spook the market and send it down into a spiral, and might not have the ability to stop that avalanche. It's almost like the wrong discussion or the wrong sentence or the wrong communication by the Federal Reserve as they kind of walk that line could be the snowball that lands on the soft powder that's been building up anyway. The market's already overvalued no matter how you look at it now, and that one little snowball could be what causes the avalanche that leads us to the next 10 or 20 or 30% correction. So they got to be really, really careful. At the same time, they can't let inflation get out of control because they're going to have a hard time stopping it. Okay, so that's their balancing act. They've got to control inflation, but they also want to make sure that they don't cause an avalanche in the stock market as well. So the Federal Reserve is certainly, what they do with interest rates in their communication, certainly something that the market's looking at. Inflation is something else that the market is looking at. That's a big thing that the market is looking at this point. Inflation right now is hovering around 5.5%. And the market doesn't like that kind of inflation. And there's a question out there as to whether it's transitory or whether it is it's going to be here for a while. The Federal Reserve is saying that it's transitory, and there's a lot of economists out there saying that it's going to be here for a while. And the Federal Reserve, of course, they're going to say it's transitory. But they don't want to say inflation is going to be 5.5% for the next 5 or 10 years. This wouldn't be good for the market, wouldn't be good for them. They don't want to say that. So, of course, they're going to say it's transitory. But the economists think it might be here for a long time. At least some of them do. Some of them think it's not transitory. We've had an inflation break for a long time. The Federal Reserve has been trying to get inflation to 2% for the last decade. And now all of a sudden it shot up to 5.5%. And there are some economists out there that are saying, hey, we're overdue. And, it might, the next 10 years might have a very high inflation because it's been very low for the last 10 years. But I think we have to take a look at why is this inflation here to begin with, and I think that helps answers the question as to whether inflation is likely to be higher or lower. And when you think about inflation is a simple supply-demand equation. If the supply is equal to demand, then there's no inflation. Okay, but if one of these two things get off kilter, then it's gonna cause an imbalance, which is what causes inflation. So if the demand for goods and services goes up, but the supply stays the same, then the price goes up, right? Okay. Whereas if the demand goes down, but the supply stays the same, then the price goes down. So demand, supply. But the reverse is also true. If the supply goes up, but the demand stays where it is, prices are going to be less. They're going to get cheaper. But if the supply goes down, even though the demand hasn't gone up, the price of goods is going to get more expensive because the supply went down. And that scenario is what's happening now. A couple of weeks ago, there were something like 75 or 76 cargo ships off the port of Los Angeles that were docked there waiting because they couldn't get workers to come in and unload the ships. So that's creating a bottleneck, and you've heard about that all over the media. And Port of LA is a big port. A lot of ships from China come into the Port of LA. They get unloaded on the docks, and then they get trained across the country or shipped across the country, or I should say trucked across the country to their final destinations. Well, what's happening is that the demand is staying the same, but because of this bottleneck, the supply has gone down, and you've heard that all over the news. So if that's what is causing the inflation, then it seems like as soon as the bottleneck situation is cleared and more workers get in there, and the ports are able to hire more workers, then that should clear itself up. Probably going to take a few months to do, but once that happens, then prices should stabilize, and you'll probably see inflation come down. So because of that, I tend to think it's probably a little more transitory. I can't imagine that in another year or two that we're going to be having the same kind of inflation discussion at 5.5%. I think it will come down because that bottleneck's got to get solved. And that also leads to another question: is why are there not a lot of workers? Well, there's not necessarily a lot of workers because of all the federal benefits and unemployment benefits that the government has been giving for all these months. Now, that ended in September, but savings rates is at all-time highs. People have saved more money. And in the state of California here is particularly talking about extending benefits to people. I know Governor Newsom's talked about that. And so that's still up in the air. So a lot of people have actually been making more money on unemployment than they would be working. And don't get me wrong, I think that the government has had to do that with all the jobs that were lost as a result. But what's happening is that hasn't incentivized people to work. And now with the state of California trying to figure out, are we going to extend benefits? Are we going to move, increase those benefits, to get them back to where they were before the federal government suspended benefits? What are we going to do? There's a lot of people that are waiting to figure out what's going to happen with their unemployment. But the fact is that unemployment has been paying people in situations more even than they made when they were working, so there was no incentive to work. And because people have saved so much money at this point, they can go back and start looking for jobs and start looking for the cream of the crop jobs because they've got so much money saved. And so it's not as urgent for them now as it may be in a couple of months. So I think we're going to see the unemployment rate start to drop in a couple of months. And I think the labor market's going to open up more as these benefits start to go away, if, in fact, California doesn't extend some of the unemployment benefits. If they do extend some of these unemployment benefits or increase some of the benefits to offset for the federal cutting of unemployment, then we might still have this labor shortage for some months to come. And, of course, labor shortage is a lot of what's causing this bottleneck, and that's going to directly impact inflation. So inflation is another big thing that the stock market is looking at. I personally think it's not something that's going to last more than 6 or 8 months, but I mean certainly no more than a year or two. That's what I think, but we don't know for sure, right? Stock market doesn't know for sure. So inflation's a big one. So another thing that I think we need to just hit on, a couple of you have asked me about this Evergrande situation that happened in China. Evergrande is the #1 real estate market developer in China, and they've threatened to go bankrupt. And there's questions as to what does that mean for the U.S. economy? What does that mean for for the Chinese economy? I don't think it's really a big deal for the U.S. economy. The stock market really, I don't think, is reacting as a result of that. And the Chinese government has already hinted that they're probably going to bail Evergrande out. But again, it's something to pay attention to. It's not something I think we really need to be concerned with. We haven't seen a major impact here in the United States, but some of you have asked me about that as well too. But it is just something else to keep an eye on. Let me glance at my notes and see what else we want to talk about real quick. We've already talked about the fact that the market's really overdue for a drop. We've talked about the COVID variants as could be a reason to for the market to get spooked if COVID starts to kind of shut things down again de facto. Even if the government doesn't do it, people may want to start staying home, not fly again, and kind of self-quarantine, if you will. That could affect the market. We talked about the Federal Reserve, talking about interest rates. We talked about Evergrande. We talked about inflation. I think the last thing that we need to talk about is, and this is a big one, the Biden tax plan. Okay, that's another thing that could absolutely spook the market. The reality is that we know that taxes are going to go up. Capital gains taxes are going to go up. Personal individual taxes are going to go up. Corporate taxes are going to increase. We know that. Biden's already said that. And you have to know that the market is... oh, sorry, my video shut off here for a second. Let me figure this out. Sorry about that. Not sure why my computer screen shut off, so I couldn't see myself. Probably wouldn't be a bad thing. But with the tax plan, you have to know that the market is reactionary. And what that means is that the market is going to act on what it thinks is going to happen, right? If a particular company, if the market thinks a particular company is going to go bankrupt, that stock will become worthless. Will drop like a rock a long time before the company becomes bankrupt because it expects the company to go bankrupt. Well, the same thing with taxes, with anything else. Now, if you go back to the Trump tax era, do you remember that when Trump announced that they're going to lower capital gains, they're going to lower personal income, they're going to lower corporate taxes, that it was very quickly that the market shot up like 20%. You remember that? Well, the reason is because the market was reactionary. Trump hadn't done any of this stuff, but the market went up 20% immediately because Trump said that this is what he's going to do. And when you lower taxes, it increases corporate revenues. They have less tax to pay, they have more revenues, which means more profit, and all that translated into about a 20% increase in valuations for corporations. So it made sense that the market went up about 20%. That's what happened. Well, Biden has announced a tax plan, and the market has kind of shrugged it off. Why? Well, I believe it's probably because of the fact that there's more obstacles for Biden to overcome than there was for Trump. Trump had a predominantly Republican House and Senate, Congress, and they could do what they wanted without a lot of friction. Biden has a lot of friction. The Senate is still 50-50. They still need to get some votes. Biden wants to do certain things. They've kind of tamed him back. It looks like the corporate tax increase is not going to be as much as he wanted it to be. Same thing with capital gains. So there's more friction there. So the market doesn't really know what to do. But at some point in time, it's going to come to light. And if Biden winds up getting his way, or if the taxes are higher than we expect, that could certainly have an impact on the stock market. So you just need to be aware of that as well. That's something to be on the lookout for. So I think that's going to wrap it up. Let me grab my notepad real quick. Yeah, that's going to do it for our fourth quarter update. Bottom line is that the market probably going to have some trouble in the fourth quarter. If I had to put my money where my mouth is, I'm going to suggest that the market, sometime in the fourth quarter is going to be a lot lower, probably 10 or 20%, and maybe end up the quarter lower. Now, the other question we have to answer, is that really bad? And the answer is no, not if you're invested for income like we are. Okay? The reality is that when you're invested for income, you're going to get your interest and dividends regardless of the value of your portfolio. So if you're spending your interest and dividends, then a few percentage drop in your portfolio doesn't matter because your income is going to stay the same, very consistent. On the other hand, if you're reinvesting your interest and dividends, then a pullback's good because now we get to reinvest and you get everything on sale. So when everything comes back, when it fluctuates the other direction, then you come out smelling like a rose. So it's not bad if you're invested for income like we are. And the reality is September was not a good month for the market, as I mentioned earlier. Market down 3 to 5%, and it wasn't a good month really for fixed income as well because the 10-year Treasury went from like 1.25 to 1.5 just in the last week of September. And of course, when the Treasury goes up, or when the yield goes up, then fixed income tend to drop a little bit. So if you have equities in your portfolio, you might see a 2 to 4% correction in that portion of your portfolio. If you have fixed income in your portfolio, as is really every one of you, our clients, there might be a 0.5% drop, maybe a 1% drop. So you're probably going to see a little fluctuation down on your portfolio because of what happened with the Treasury, the 10-year Treasury, and the stock market. So I would expect to see your portfolios down maybe just a little bit, couple percentage points or so in as a result of the close of September 30th. So, of course, if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to call my office. Let me know. I certainly appreciate having you as a client. I thank you for your trust. I thank you for your business. We don't take it lightly, and I'd love to field any questions that you have as a result of this. But hopefully you'll go back and find that email for AssetBook. And hopefully this fourth quarter update has helped you. And feel free to call me if you have any questions. Thank you. God bless.